My entitled, creepy grandmother not only cannot accept the fact that I'm a grown adult, but also is claiming to anybody within earshot that my future twins actually belong to her. And after dealing with some really creepy comments, as well as some awful behavior by my grandmother, I'm now left at an impasse, where right now I seriously don't know what to do. Here's what happened. Okay, so I feel super conflicted. I'm a 25-year-old female, and my 69-year-old grandmother simply cannot accept the fact that I am grown and acts incredibly entitled to my children. She is genuinely nice most of the time, but there are things that she does frequently that really aggravate me. For some background, I'm the first grandchild, and I'm definitely the favorite. And trust me, I am not saying this to brag. My mom had me when she was 17 years old, and my biological dad nor any of his family ever had anything to do with me. This meant that she's the only grandmother I ever had until my mom married my stepdad when I was 8. My mother and I lived with my grandmother up until that point, and even after we moved out, I would still visit her or spend the night with her all the time for years. I sort of slowed down on visiting all the time when I began college because I had a full-time job as well. For the past few years, I will typically see her maybe once or twice a month, and each time I talk to her or whenever I visit, she will make comments about how she's sad that I don't spend the night with her anymore, or that I just don't visit as much, despite me being a 25-year-old married woman with literally 2 kids on the way and a job. She complains that I don't call her enough, but the phone literally goes both ways. In her words, she sits at home and does nothing all day, so why would she not think to call her family members or something like that? Despite my age, she still treats me as a literal baby. She will occasionally start rubbing my butt and start singing a nursery rhyme, which is something she used to do when I was a baby. Every time she does it, I jump and I move forward, and she'll say to me, "Oh, don't act like that. You used to laugh and laugh when I would do that." And I would say, "Yeah, when I was a toddler, but I'm 25 now." And she'll say to me, "You're always going to be grandma's baby, and I'll rub it and pat it whenever I want." And then she'll just start laughing. One time, my grandmother, my mom, my sister, and I all went on vacation together. We shared one hotel room with 2 beds, and my sister was in the bathroom and I wanted to change, so I told my mom and grandmother not to look my way because I was changing my clothing. My grandmother then said to me, "I'm gonna look." So I was like, "Why?" And I let out an uncomfortable laugh, and she said to me, "It's not like I haven't seen you naked before." So again, I reiterated, "Well, that's when I was a kid, but I'm an adult now." And she just laughed at me. It's like in her eyes, I never aged past the age of 10. She will be shocked and stunned when I suddenly like something that as a kid I used to hate. And the same thing applies vice versa. For example, I used to hate salads as a kid, but in my 20s, I eat them all the time. She refuses to believe that I really like salads because 15 years ago I didn't. When she is finally convinced, she gets sad. She says things like, "I can't believe I don't know what my girl eats anymore," which I know isn't a huge deal, but paired with everything else, it's just another thing that really bothers me. Anyways, when I announced I was pregnant with twins, I announced it to all of my grandparents at once in person. But once I did this, my grandmother shrieked with joy, and she began sobbing right there on the spot. She then literally got in my step-grandmother's face, pointed and said, "Those are my babies, you hear me? They are mine." And my step-grandmother just sort of stood there and said, "Well, I guess I should be congratulating you then." And my grandmother says, "They're more like my grandbabies than great-grandbabies. And since I raised this girl, she's more like a daughter." Now, my mother gets a little uncomfortable by this, because while I did live with her for the first 8 years of my life, this doesn't replace my grandmother as my mother. My mother later asked me who I wanted to be at the hospital when I gave birth, and my grandmother interrupted me and said, "I will be at the hospital, just to let you know." And I just looked at her wide-eyed and I said, "I didn't say you could come to the hospital." But she just looked at me and said, "Oh, I know. I'm just saying that I will be there." And all of this has been amplified throughout my pregnancy. She refers to my children as her babies. She tells me that I shouldn't do certain things, such as carry a 5-pound duffel bag, all because I'm suddenly hurting her babies. Eventually, my mom, my grandma, and myself went baby clothes shopping, and there was a shirt that said "Mama's Boy" or something like that. And she pointed it out and said, "You don't even need to worry about buying a shirt like that. They're going to be Grandma's boys, so I'm settling that right now." She even refers to them as her babies to other people. I was at her house with my mom, and my great aunt called my grandmother. My great aunt asked, "Have you had your babies yet?" And my mom, who was stunned, asked, "Wait, what?" Well, my grandmother then turned and pointed to my stomach and said, "My babies," and then began rubbing my stomach. She even began saying in front of my mom, who is the actual grandma, "This is your grandma. You hear me? Your grandma." And sometimes, instead of acting super entitled, she will switch and act like she's completely outcasted. She will say things things like, "I sure hope you let me see these boys at least sometime. It would be so sad if you didn't." And she says this for literally no reason at all. I have never stated that I would withhold them from her, but she acts like I'm never going to let her see them all out of the blue. All in all, the reason why I find it hard to set boundaries with her and why I feel so guilty is because my grandfather passed away when I was 18 years old. They were together for 40 years, and I know that she misses him dearly. She lives all by herself, and I understand that she is very lonely, but she has said that my kids have given her a purpose again, and that she feels excited to feel needed again, which is a big thing for her. For example, she got sad when my little sister got her first car because she simply wouldn't need her anymore to take her to school. She has done a lot for me and my family, and while I do love her a lot, these things that she does really just drive me up a wall. It's like she's trying to take the place of both my mother and I when it comes to my children. She lives completely in the past, and it seems like she almost resents the fact that I'm an adult and need to be treated with some kind of respect. She wasn't like this at all before my grandfather died, so I know it has to be something caused by grief. I just need to know, am I overreacting by being uncomfortable and annoyed by all of these things? My mom gets annoyed with her a lot, so she understands, but my stepdad tells me that I'm being too sensitive. What should I do? Okay, in my opinion, I think it's very important to set boundaries like right now. For starters, I would never allow that woman to touch me ever again. Like, I don't care what the circumstances are at all. If I was in your shoes, this lady would absolutely be crossing a serious boundary for me. Like the whole rubbing the belly and patting the butt thing, like that is really weird. And also her trying to be like, "Oh yeah, I'm gonna look at you change and watch you get naked." It's like, dude, what are we doing right now? That is so creepy and weird. So that would be step one for me of like, yeah, you're definitely never doing that again. But also, in my opinion, if this was my grandmother acting that way, I would absolutely speak up and set the ground rules very clearly in front of all of us. I would correct her anytime she tries to act like, "Oh, those are my babies," especially with the way she acted towards your step grandma. Like that would have been like, "Hold up, time out, what on earth are you doing?" Like that kind of behavior absolutely deserves to be ridiculed and corrected right there on the spot. It is not a scenario where we should just let it slide, because that kind of crap is just unacceptable in my opinion. And that kind of leads me to like another point. It seems like everybody in the family is letting her behavior slide, and nobody's really correcting her because she always plays the guilt-tripping route. She not only wants to have these kids all to herself, but then she covers the bases of like, "Oh, I hope you actually let me see them." Like she's playing the obsessive great-grandmother, but also trying to spin it as if you don't want her around so that maybe you feel forced to allow her to be around your kids. Like she's playing all sides of the field at the same time, and it all comes off as like super manipulative. So in my opinion, based on the way she's acting, I think you need to set boundaries right now and make it very clear that these babies are your children and not her property. Because her behavior, in my opinion, and I really do mean this, it comes off as very alarming and incredibly creepy. And if she starts acting up in the way that she's acted before, in my opinion, it is absolutely time to speak up and correct her for the weird things that she's saying. If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, link down below in the description. Also, go to amithejerk.com/submit if you would like to submit your own stories. My entitled mom has treated me like garbage for years, and now that I'm on the verge of moving out, it's all hit a breaking point because right now I really don't know what to do. So for a bit of background, my parents divorced a few years ago, and before that, my mother and I were inseparable, and I always told her everything. Meanwhile, I didn't talk to my dad much at all. Shortly after the divorce, my mom started dating, and I supported her relationship because she found herself in good company. I don't particularly like this man myself, but I still go out with him. My father found a wife with a teenage daughter, and I like them both. We get along well, and I joke around with them all the time. Now, my mother was jealous for a long time because I spent time with my father and my new stepmother. I think she was afraid I would replace her. I liked it more at my dad's because my friends were still there, and my dad didn't nag me about every little thing. My mother used to scream so loudly at me when I was little that the neighbors could hear the screams all the way outside. And this is in regards to like forgetting to do my homework, or if I didn't hear her calling me into the living room. Now, I was really having fun at my dad's place, but I didn't want to spend any more time in my mom's flat, so I wanted to move in on my own. The perfect opportunity came about half a year ago when my grandfather's tenant moved out, and that's when I finally got to live on my own. Well, my mom heard about this and was a little bit upset that I didn't wait until the end of high school to move out. She even said to me, "It's good that you're moving out so you don't have to suffer from me." And before I moved, my mom was very busy blaming me for literally everything. For example, I had either forgotten my keys in my room or they were at the bottom of my bag and I just couldn't find them. I had just come from the opening night of our school play. It was getting closer to midnight, and I tiredly called my mother to see if she could come and unlock the door. Well, she came in angry and started shouting loudly. She said to me, "Get ready to pack all your stuff. I've been thinking that you should move in with your father completely. I am not your servant." And at this point, I was still living half with my mom and half with my dad at the time. I was going to my room to pack my overnight stuff, and my friend, who we will call Sam, was coming to pick me up at my dad's place. She then said to me, "You're just like your dad. You take advantage of me, and then when you don't need me anymore, you're just angry and awful towards me. I am only human." Now, at this point, I snapped because I've heard that phrase from so many awful people, and I just don't like it one bit. She then said to me, "Oh well, you just think I'm an awful person." And despite the fact that I told her no, I don't think that, she just kept saying over and over again, "Yes, you do. You definitely do." And at this point, I just rushed down the hallway to wait for my ride, even though she wasn't supposed to fetch me for maybe about half an hour. So many of these kinds of pointless tantrums had already happened, so I think you can vaguely understand why I wanted to move out on my own. Every single time, she managed to mention how she was only human. She would say to me, "I always think you don't spend time with me when you're here, and you just always get away with housework and all this stuff, and you don't do anything with me. You would probably rather go where you feel good than stay with me, but you're always in your own room sulking." But I responded by saying, "Yeah, hey, I'd probably feel better talking to you and spending time with you if you didn't start complaining about everything every single time. And this is just a little thing." She then said to me, "You only like me when I smile. I can't smile all the time." But I just said, "You don't have to as long as you don't complain all the time. I was ready to watch a movie with you tonight, but you said no." And then she said, "No, you weren't." And after having enough of this, I just said, "Yes, I was." And then I slammed my door and went back to my room because my company just wasn't good enough, even though it's what she wanted. She would say stuff to me like, "You always get angry right away. You only come to me when you need help or money. You surely don't behave like that with your father. Your father and stepmother must treat you better than I do, and always in your best interest, of course. That's probably why you wanted to go on holiday with them far away from me. This is just who I am." Well, you're giving it away right now. Would you rather be with your father than here if it's so nice there? And this just goes on and on for dozens of minutes almost every single day. Now, in response to that wonderful rage, she guilt trips me into love and apologies. She will say to me, "I love you beyond measure. You're the best gift I've ever received. I don't like it when you're here and you spend all your time in your own room. Homework could be done in the same room as me, you know. But the time you spend in the same room as me is always face down. I mean, I was able to be with you when you were younger, even though your father wasn't. And that's why you were only in half daycare, so I could be with you more. And I still want to, but the difference is that now I have no energy." But it's like, first of all, why are you complaining about not having enough time with me if you are literally not up for it? And secondly, my dad was working at the time and she wasn't. Third, I was a child, and that's what parents are supposed to do. They're supposed to spend time with their children. She would say to me, "I don't know what I did wrong that you don't dare tell me things, and you just shut yourself in your own room." Now, the apex of all of this is when I had borrowed her car so I could drive my friend from one place to another for a couple of hours. We had an agreement that I could use her car all summer whenever I needed to, if I paid for the fuel myself, as her commute was within walking distance. So I was returning the car, and she was taking me back to my place. I was telling her about my travel plans for next spring with a friend, as she asked what countries we were thinking about. I said to her, "Well, Ireland would be nice to visit again, but my friend would like to see the place better, as it would be a new country for her." My mom then said, "It might not be worth going as it's slower to get around, and you might want to go on your own trip." She then said, "And you should probably rent your own car if you're going to be in the country for a long period of time." And at that point, I was thinking to myself, well, that's not what I meant at all. Do you ever listen to me? Like, let me have a say in this. She then fired back at me and said, "Will you let your father have a say? Or even your stepmother? I'm only good for when you need a car or want money or know that you'll need money in the future. Otherwise, you just can't contact me." And I'm thinking, yeah, because the time that you see me, you're either screaming at me or getting angry. But anytime I tell her that, she would say, "I'm only human." She then said to me, "No need to drive all the way to the yard. Just leave it on the road and I'll leave right away. Then you can tell me how much money you need for the trip next spring. No need to contact me ever again." And then she just drove off. Now, I'm not surprised this actually happened, and I had been waiting for it, but not for a reason like this. My plan was to slowly meet her from time to time, and maybe leave it at that so we could see each other at family gatherings without the awkwardness, and maybe in some way heal our relationship. But now I can understand that that's not it. I don't know what I should do about my graduation and such, and I don't want her to come because she would only get angrier and more insulted if I didn't allow her to be there. She might contact me before that anyways, so she could be invited, since my career path and life has been so important to her. But now I tell my dad everything, and I just come along with him and his new family, so it is a win. But I still don't know what to do about my mother. What should I do? Honestly, if I was in your shoes, I would invite her to my graduation, but that would be it. Like, that would be the final concluding moment in my relationship with my mom in that regard, because the way she's acting is so toxic and so unnecessary. Like, seriously, just look at the way she's acting towards you and literally all your life choices. Nothing you ever do is good enough, and she's always just waiting to say some awful thing towards you. And like, that is just so unacceptable, and you do not deserve to deal with that, regardless of if she's your mom or not. Like, she's clearly bitter about this divorce or something like that, and she's just taking it out on you in ways that you do not deserve. So hopefully your life with your dad and your stepmom can be a lot better than what your mom is giving you, because she sounds like an awful person, and I don't blame you for trying to move on. Am I the jerk for telling my sister that she is ruining her child's life by giving him an iPad that he can use 24/7 without any restrictions? Because right now she is very angry with me, and at this point I seriously don't know what to do. Here's what happened. So my sister and her husband have a 10-year-old kid who we will call Jimothy, who me and my husband sometimes babysit on the weekends, and on some days I take him to school. As of about a year ago, we started to notice that Jimothy was beginning to develop an American accent. For reference, we are Australian, and small kids have phases, so I didn't want to make this into a thing. But over the next few months, the accent got thicker and Jimothy became more irritable. Me and my husband brought this up with my sister, who said that Jimothy wasn't very grumpy when he was with her. He then started losing interest in almost all activities that he used to enjoy. And again, this was a concern for me, and every weekend it just got so much worse. He would complain of being bored when we would offer an exhaustive list of all the things we could do with him, and he would just say no to every single one of them. The school year for 2024 started, and on the weekend after that, Jimothy told us that his teacher and a few classmates had asked him how long he'd been in the United States before moving to Australia, because at this point, his American accent was indistinguishable from a general American accent, and my husband and I were really wondering what was happening. Then it was Jimothy's birthday party. His family was invited, including me, and so were all of his friends. And this was the moment that made me realize to some extent what was going on. He was on an iPad, scrolling some kind of short-form content that I did not recognize. His friends wanted to play with him, and he just did not notice that they were even there. People were giving him presents, and he acted like he was inconvenienced for having to turn the iPad off. Never before had any of my nieces or nephews reacted like this upon me giving them money and a delicious treat. I told my sister that something was going on, and that Jimothy is obviously not in a good way. She seemed very offended that I was questioning her parenting choices, as she put it, and she decided that me and my husband babysitting Jimothy had to stop. Well, the next time I saw Jimothy was very recently at my niece's birthday party with a different set of parents, and Jimothy was completely glued to the iPad. He was noticeably skinnier, which I suspect was because he was forgetting to eat in favor of spending more time on his iPad. And when anyone went over to talk to him, he would almost instinctively push the screen towards his body so nobody could see. Now, at this point, I had to talk to my sister and her husband. I told them what I thought, that a year ago, Jimothy was an energetic kid who got along really well with everybody, but now he's reclusive, and it's obvious from just looking at him that he is absolutely skipping meals. My sister denied any changes in Jimothy's behavior, but her husband did admit that I was right to some extent, and Jimothy's friends stopped trying to hang out with him because he said no 100% of the time. I told my sister that she was wrecking Jimothy's life by continuing to let this iPad stuff happen, and at that point she started shouting at me and then walked out of the party. So I really need to know, am I the jerk for saying what I did to my sister? Because right now I really don't know what to do. I don't think you're the jerk personally, because I think you're completely right. This kid is very clearly addicted to his iPad, and he is clearly not being monitored by his parents, and they're using that iPad as like a babysitter instead of monitoring him more closely. Like, this kid absolutely has a problem and it needs to be addressed. And I don't know if you've run into a kid who's like addicted to their iPad, but I definitely have, and they are a nightmare to deal with. Like, seriously, I've seen a kid lose his mind, go absolutely insane because somebody took his iPad away. Like, it did not matter what was happening around them, they literally only wanted the iPad and nothing else would make them happy. So I think you expressing that to your sister and her husband, in my opinion, was some very well-needed tough love, because these people just don't get it. They clearly don't see what they're doing to their son, and they're also not even watching what this kid is watching. Like, really, if the American accent wasn't a dead giveaway, that their son is clearly watching way too much content online, then I really just don't know what else is going to get through to these people. Because eventually, it's going to be too little too late, and And this kid's gonna turn into a real monster and be completely antisocial and just a weird kid in general when he becomes a teenager. So no, you're not the jerk by telling your sister exactly what's going on, because her lack of accountability is going to ruin her child. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. To finish listening to all the stories, check out the playlist at the top of the description. And if you want some chill music to put on in the background, check out easymode.com. If you like Am I the Jerk, subscribe to Am I the Genius. Everything will be linked down below in the description.